in Vartalaap. Today we have Tara Douglas with us. Tara is an animator of a very high excellence, and she has been recording several stories of the tribal stories in their own language. So she is both interested in languages, preservation of languages, plus the stories. Tara ji, you are welcome to Meera Dass Vartalaap.
Thank you.
And I would like to know, you've been recording so many tribal stories which nobody heard in their language, which is something I do not know of people who have done that before. So please let us know, how did your journey begin? What are the difficulties you face? And what drew you to all these places? What brought you to all these places? From selection, from your coming here to the selection of stories, to the language, how do you deal with so many, not one, but so many difficulties? Over to you. Okay?
Right. Well, my background anyway is in animation. I studied it at art college, but I was never interested in going into commercial animation. I was much more interested in folk tales and myths and how to translate that into animation. And then I had this mentor from Scotland. She's still there, and she was doing this in Scotland. She was had a little animation company, and she was translating the Scottish mythologies and stories and folk tales into animations. So I worked under her for a while, and then she wanted to do a project in India. She had been to India, and I've got a lifelong connection with India because I'm born here and all, spent more than half of my life in India. And so she asked me to help her out and to be the project coordinator in India. And that was the tallest story competition project. And the idea was to make animation films of Indian folk tales. And then in our research, we came across Adivasi tribal stories. And for Leslie, that was of the most interest because, she's into minority cultures and also languages. So we did a research trip. In fact, we did 2 research trips in central India. And that's where we came into contact with many different artists and storytellers from Adivasi communities. And that was a project that went on for a few years because we did work together with many other people as part of the team in her small studio with a bit of funding in Scotland. This would have been the project got finished in 2006, the tallest story competition. So that was my first introduction to tribal stories of India. Yeah.
So that's, Tara, that's when I met you. And I know that even to do the animation of, you did for 5 different tribes. And each one of them very removed and remote, and even the making of the art objects based on the stories, it was not an easy task. So how did you cross the communication barrier? How could you bring out from within them so much artwork based on their stories? Dialogue writing, I mean, it's not an easy thing. Animation by itself is difficult. Elaborate as much as you possibly can about all this.
Exactly, please. As you said, animation is one of the hardest parts, but also communication, because, as you know yourself, in India is so diverse in languages. Every place has different languages and all. And often enough, usually the storytellers are the elder generation of people who probably only really speak their mother tongue. And I'm not very good in languages, So it's always been a challenge, and it's still very much a challenge today with what I'm doing here with the Wanchos. It's probably my biggest challenge is the language. But then, it's finding good people to work with is the key to it, right? And it's always good to work with a local teacher, because the teachers do tend to be at least bilingual, and they might also have familiarity with outsiders coming, and they're good at explaining things. And here, for example, in this Wancho village, I found a fantastic collaborator. He is the teacher, and he translates and explains things. He interprets and translates for me. But again, it's a process that it develops. Because you can't really translate it literally word for word. You have to work with somebody who has an understanding, not only of the stories and the culture, but also the storytellers, because the storytellers have different ways of, telling. So it's this whole project, and all my projects really from that have been collaborations with the local community. That's the key for it.
Taraji, your what you produce is complex in not one way but several ways. There is a pre-preparation which is required, and then the actual animation, and then the post production. So what is your methodology, and how do you kind of proceed in this? Could you please explain that?
Yeah. Well, I was learning from Leslie Mackenzie, and then I have taken this up. I did take it up and completed it as a PhD. So that was all about studying the methodology about doing this kind of collaboration with the community to produce media and animation. So then the methodology, well, it's something which has developed over quite a number of years. I started out doing this as Leslie Mackenzie's assistant, and then I developed it more through taking it up as a PhD study, which was all about the method of collaborating with the community and how to interpret these stories in a completely new medium of animation. And in that process, I came to know more and more about how important it is to be authentic to the material. So that means doing a lot of good research. Spending a lot of time doing research is so important. And as for the process of translating into animation, that is something which is very complicated, and it's not something that I do. I usually go to the field and I collect the material and I make the contacts and possibly do artwork and find storytellers and write a script and things like that. Make the whole pre-production planning part can be done in a community environment, like in the village, for example, or in a workshop. But then the actual production part, because it is a very complex technical procedure which requires training and all, it is usually done working with, it has been done with students of animation or film design from various institutes across India that I've worked with. One of the key ones was National Institute of Design, where the young people are very well trained and they gain the experience in the technology and that. So working with the community, it's about adapting, how to adapt these stories, And if I or anybody comes as an outsider and tries to do it, we will get it wrong because we don't understand the culture properly. So that's where it's really important to have the local collaboration and inputs to make sure that we are not adulterating the material, and changing the meaning and the context and all of that and misinterpreting it. Of course, there's still scope for misinterpretations all the time, but we just try to be aware of that possibility and minimize it, reduce it. So yes, the production part is done with the help of technical, either experts or students. And I do workshops sometimes in the villages as well, just to introduce especially the young people. They're all watching animation on the internet now, on their mobile phones, and they enjoy it. So they should also understand the procedure to do it. But because it does require specialist training, whatever they produce is just to learn how it's done, but it doesn't generally get used in the actual final outputs.
Talking about workshops, you have also held workshops with the storytellers, and you have involved them in your storytelling all the time. It must have left the people with whom you are working a little more enlightened and interested in what you are doing. We will at some point ask about these people, because you have left an impact on the minds, and it has been a two-way thing. It is not that there's something you're taking from them, but you're also giving a whole lot in return. This is what I know, but we will come to this question after you tell us about two things. One is the Adivasi Art Trust that you had formed, and the second question that I will ask you would be about your current project, which is a very large project. It goes beyond animation, and it involved a whole lot of other things.
The Adivasi Arts Trust is a small organization which I'm a co-founder of with some people in the United Kingdom. It is registered charity in the UK. We set it up in 2007, so it's quite a while ago now. Actually, it was set up in order to try and raise funds for our projects. We had done this Taller Story competition project with Leslie Mackenzie, and we needed to dub it into all these tribal languages and distribute it. And for that, I needed to raise some funds, so we set up. Back to the Adivasi Arts Trust.
Yeah.
That's a small organization, and I'm a co-founder of the Adivasi Arts Trust. I set it up with some friends in the UK. Those, like our chairman, he's a retired anthropologist. And it's set up to promote and preserve Indigenous storytelling and art through digital media. Because that's what I'm interested in doing. But yeah, it's about appreciating Indigenous art and culture and knowledge, really. And the focus has been on India. And I set it up in order to raise funds for dubbing these animation films into tribal languages and distributing them, touring and screenings and inviting artists to come from India, tribal artists, to come for workshops and programs in the UK. It's not doing, it's kind of struggling, we could say, since the COVID pandemic. It's been really difficult to get any funding for a small organization in this rather specialized area because it's also trying to bring together completely contrasting things. One is this Indigenous earthy storytelling, and the other thing is this digital technology, so it's a new area. Yeah.
Could you tell us how you can always appeal to people to fund you, and you can continue to work?
Well, we do have a Patreon funding site, right, for donations.
Okay.
And whatever donations come to us, it's used very wisely, and it goes a long way, because that's the way I am. I've got this way of making those funds stretch as far as possible due to limited resources.
So I would like you to elaborate upon your current project, which is a very elaborate one, which goes beyond animation, and it now engulfs the entire community and the way they live. And so please elaborate upon that as much in detail as you would like.
Well, it has been a journey, this whole, and it has gone its own way as well. I did start out doing the animation part, but then, as I mentioned, it's been really very difficult to get the financial support to do animation. It takes a long time. For example, our projects, they take many years to translate these stories into animations, because you're working under conditions where they're not optimal for producing animation. You're working with limited resources, basically. So anyway, I had faced problems getting support, and a couple of projects, they kind of they got mismanaged, not by the Adivasi Arts Trust, but by the system of Indian government funding, whatever. So finding that it wasn't so easy to produce the animation films anymore, but I hope to go back to that as well. I haven't given it up, but I've taken a little sidestep, because in this research for the animation films, this came into contact visiting remote areas like this place, for example, and so many other remote areas, and then finding out that the storytellers are, you know, they're elderly people and they're not going to last forever, and the traditions are getting lost, and the local communities also recognize that, and they're worried that the stories, which, because it's an oral tradition, you know, so it's not passed on to the next generation, then it's lost. So it became important to actually record the stories for themselves rather than just for the animation. And then of course the stories have a whole cultural context, and you know, they're connected to traditions and ways of life, and that's so interesting. That is the whole backbone of the story. So it went more into, and that was also probably following on from the PhD, you know.
So what is this project? Could you explain the project?
Yes. Well, okay, when I was coming to this village, Kamwanoknu, which is in the most remote corner of India, it's just a few kilometers away from the border, international border with Myanmar. I was coming here to record stories for animation, and then I was recording stories from the elders before they pass away. And in that process, I was also, of course, admiring the location, and because they've got this traditional houses, right? Construction methods in this Wancho culture and community. And I was noticing, each time I came back, I was noticing that more and more of the houses were actually getting replaced by modern kind of modifications. And, you know, I was concerned about that. And then I had a meeting with local people in the village, and they were also saying the same thing, that they noticed that it's rapidly changing. Yeah, so we can imagine that in, say, about 10 years or so, the whole village vista is going to look quite different, and the knowledge is not getting passed on so much. The younger people in these villages are getting educated, and then they're going out looking for employment elsewhere, so they're not receiving the knowledge of, you know, their culture in the same way. So anyway, I heard about this project to document endangered wooden architecture, and it's a small grant, and I applied for it through the Adivasi Arts Trust last year, at the beginning of last year, and it's to document the endangered wooden architecture. And this project goes on all over the world, and we've got one project which is just concluding right here in Kamwanoknu. A year ago we began the project, and I managed to engage 6 young architects from Assam to come here to the village, and they selected some buildings. 19 buildings were chosen as case studies. So this is a project to document the traditional architecture of the Wancho community. And as I was mentioning, we can see a lot of changes coming each year to the village. They have this beautiful organic architecture, like this kind of place where we're sitting in right now. They use the local materials, which is primarily bamboo and wood, to construct their houses. That's a traditional way, and they're thatched houses as well. And because it's all changing, discussions with the people in the village itself, through Jatwang, who is my collaborator and interpreter, we came to understand that even the elder people in this area are also concerned about the loss of their traditions, including the architectural traditions. And then I managed to raise a small grant from this Endangered Wooden Architectures project, which is, it's a small grant, and it's funded by the Arcadia Foundation in the UK. And it's been a year-long project. And it brought 6 young architects from Assam, thanks to you, because you were the person who recommended those architects.
So I'm glad that they came and did this.
They came for 10 days, and they stayed in the village, and we went out every day, and we went to this village and Kamwa Noksa, which is the village up the road, and beyond that is Kasa, and then the very last village before the Myanmar border, Jagan. We went to those 4 villages and surveyed some buildings, and they were measured with the laser measures, and sketches were done, field sketches and notes were done, meanwhile, because my background is not architecture at all, but I'm the principal investigator, which is basically the project coordinator. But I also have this film background and my cameras and all, and I love to record stories. So while the architects were doing that, I was also with them, and I was interviewing the house owners and other people, and the construction experts of how they did it. And you know, when I interviewed them, I didn't know what they were talking about. Jatwang would say, look, can you just talk about your house construction? And they would be talking away in their Wansho language, and I wouldn't have a clue what they were saying, but I would be focusing on you know, trying to just capture the material well. And then later on, me and Jatwang would work for many hours in every evening, doing the translation and putting subtitles in English. Yeah, and this material is going to go into an archive. Right?
But what I liked about this project is, one, of course, people talking about how the concerns and the construction type and how the construction has changed over years. So they were expressing some concerns about that. I saw the film that you made, and I thought it was extremely important to know the views of the elderly and their concerns. And this architecture, you also kind of documented the making of houses, etc. So there are 3-4 very relevant things. One is what are the names of various components of the building material, and the way they are used. The second is the names of the floor or room areas.
Yes.
And yesterday, as was mentioned in that your program, there are, like he said, there are 178 different names for every corner of the house, whereas in a modern house there are like bedrooms and drawing rooms and only 5 or 6, maximum 5 or 6 words for various parts of the house. And here you have 178 different names for different parts of the house. So the richness of the indigenous architecture I think it's a very important project that you've done, and I think it should be shown around in various parts of architectural schools and colleges and all that.
Well, in this project there's been a lot of things to juggle, because I've worked with different groups of people in this project, and everyone has their own angles and perspectives, you know, and because it's an architecture-focused project, the administrators of the grant, they were really focused on, they just wanted these architectural drawings done by professional architects, whereas the village people, you know, they want to tell their stories, and the stories are so important, you know. And yes, exactly what you were saying, you know, I learned so much through doing this project, and because it's all connected so much to the culture and way of life. This architecture, you can't really, it'd be difficult to separate it, you know. And so just producing, and you see they just improvise a lot with the building. I mean, of course it is, they have a very good method of building, and they follow that and they pass it on, but at the same time a lot of it is improvised. It's not exact measurements, for example, and even the materials are like what is available, kind of a thing.
Also, I found that it is it sounds and looks very easy, but it is very technical. The house making is very technical. If one wants to replicate it elsewhere, you really need to understand what is the kind of pressure a bamboo can take, or what is the thickness of the bamboo which is used in the post, or whether it is used in the beams or rafters or whatever. So it looks simple, but it is highly technical. And you having recorded it in words as well, apart from measured drawing and this and that, I think it was a great service that you've done to people in indigenous architecture.
One of the things that really did come across was that that every part of the house has a name, and that's according to its function and its position. So by knowing the name, you know where it is and what it is doing, and how it fits into the whole of this final structure. And So that's what they were telling us over and over again, was the different names of the parts of the building, and also, and each house is, it follows a pattern. They have like, it's mainly divided into 3 main parts, each house. There's the front room, which is like the public room. Yeah, it's called a chinka, if I'm pronouncing it right, in Wancho, right? Chinka is the like front room, the public room, and it has the rice pounder in it, and that's where public meetings or whatever goes on. And then you have the fonka, which is actually a very important room. That's the kitchen, and that's more or less the women's domain. And then we have the kamke, which is the back room. And the kamke traditionally has a bamboo floor, and that's where like family meetings, family get-togethers take place, apparently, and also where the family members sleep in the kamke on the bamboo floor, mostly. And what else?
Okay. So we are in the village, Kamwa Noknu, and we're very privileged to be visiting the site that Tara has documented in so much great detail. I would like to thank Tara for her for this interview, but I would like Sarthak to continue to see the house which Tara will show you, and I would like her to show you all the objects that she has displayed here, which are, each one of them speaks, has a story behind it. So I would end with my interview, but Sarthak will continue with recording the architecture and the objects within.
Okay.
He's calling me Nyatong, which means elder sister, because in this culture, they don't refer to each other by name. You know, everyone is related to everybody else, and there's, you know, it's according to age. And see, it's just Nyatong, and that means elder sister. Hello, hi. They come for sweeties. Yeah.
And one would like to take a round of the house and the objects that are displayed here, and gradually we'll go around the village and we'll look at the sites all around. The landscape is absolutely amazing, one of the most beautiful landscapes that India can offer.
This photograph here was from my first visit, and this is actually taken in the school, and this was a little animation workshop that I did there to introduce young people to techniques of animation. And he's doing some cutout animation. We made a little puppet of a tiger, and he's moving it, and this is my camera tripod filming it frame by frame, and this is Manchai. And so that was my first visit. And these ones here are the chief. This is the chief puppet. In fact, I should show you my chief, because I've actually got him in the tin trunk there. I made this animation model. I actually made it in Dehradun during the COVID pandemic, when I was wanting to come here, but I couldn't because of the lockdown. So anyway, I made this animation puppet of the Wangham, the chief, because our project, which we were going to make into the animation film, which hasn't yet been done, it was the story of the first chief and how he came out of the gourd. According to the stories in this area, the first chief emerged from a gourd, right? So I made the chief, and we did some animation with him in our workshops, and we took him to Shillong, and we were all ready to do this story, but then so far it hasn't managed to be pulled off. And this is the gourd, right? So the hero, but we don't have a photograph of the hero, Topa, who's a local guy, he cut the gourd and split the gourd in two. It's all about this story of the two brothers, the elder brother and the younger brother, and there were 2 gourds, and he cut the first gourd and he killed the entity that was inside the gourd, which was the elder brother. Then he cut the second gourd, and out of that came the chief, and that was how the chief was created. But it's a longer story than that. So we got the 2 animation models there of the chief. Should I bring out the chief? You see, he's an animation model. So he's got wires inside him, so you can pose him and he can be all animated. And he's got these blue beads here, which is the chief of the village. Only the chief of the village, chief family men, can wear these blue beads. And this is his his langoti, his traditional outfit, blue color. And this is his traditional jewelries and all, and headdress, and some tattoo mark on painted, head hunting tattoo mark painted. Because he's a warrior chief. And he's got his little warrior basket there. And this was to hold him up, and he would be filmed here like this against the green screen. Yeah, and then we could put some other background. So that's the animation model, yeah.
It's really good.
These are some photographs that I have printed up and displayed at the Wano Center for Art, Culture and Knowledge. And this is a little local initiative by me and by Jatwang in the village. You know, and anyway, this is one of our storytellers. He's no more. He was Jatwang's father. And so we've got his photograph here, and then here, that's me standing there with Jatwang's father and his mother and his second mother, stepmother, you could say. Yeah. Well, these are all photographs. These are photographs from previous visits to this area. This one is there. I'm standing next to Jatwang's father and mother. They have both passed away, and this is his stepmother. And this was on my first visit to Kamuanoklu. And this is Jatwang's father, who is one of the storytellers who has shared the story of the creation of the first chief and the god, and that's published in our book, Myths, Memory and Folktale of the Wancho tribe of Arunachal Pradesh. And here we've got, this photograph these are my young friends, Choi Mai and Tonge, and this was a workshop that we did in 2020 here in the village. We had a lot of fun in that workshop. I turned up in the village with about 50 kilos of luggage, including this green screen and all kinds of things, equipment. And I was determined to do this workshop, and I roped these young people into it, and they had a lot of fun. And it's the story of the gourd. And here we've got, these are gourds,
Okay.
right? These are traditional, in a sense that they did used to make masks out of gourds. And the gourd was used, was it? I think it's during, anyway, it was during a female ceremony, they used the gourd as a mask, but this has been a bit modified because we use this as an animation prop.
Okay.
Right? So here, you see it's become a mask. I mean, it was a mask, but we have added these eyes and jewelry and hair because we wanted to animate it. And it's about, the story is the first part of this gourd story, and it's about two brothers, the elder brother and the younger brother, who lived in the sky, and they came down to Earth, and one of them got trapped on Earth. The younger brother got trapped on Earth. We decided, through lots of discussions and what can I say, experimenting and stuff, we decided that we would try to use these gourds because these were celestial beings, you know, and we wanted to also bring in some of the local art forms. And so this idea of using this gourd as a mask, you know, it transformed the wearer into these two characters. And it was enacted by the young people themselves in the workshop, and we recorded that. Then here, this is a very interesting, and this is a picture of an elder from the local village across the way called Ninu, and he's holding this brass pot, and this brass pot is a relic from this Ninu massacre that took place in 1875.
Okay.
You know, when that's a historical event, and this is left over from that, and this is in the chief's house at Ninu, and this is also in Ninu. And these are some folk singers, they are village people, farmers in fact, but they're also very good singers, and I have recorded them singing the love songs, Wancho love songs, and it's really very beautiful and mesmerizing and captivating. So, and yeah, other than that, these are just things which I have collected. This is actually a Wancho wooden sculpture. It is from Veria Elwin's book,
Okay.
called The Art of the Northeast Frontier. And this sculpture used to be in the village across the way called Mintong, but I've heard that it got destroyed in a fire. It was in the Morong, in the Pa, the dormitory in that village, but it got destroyed. But I really liked this because it had the three heads, you know. So that was for me a good inspiration for animation story, you know. this place is the Wano Center for Art, Culture and Knowledge. Well, this is a little house that Jatwang and his family built for my second visit to come back to Kamwanoknu. And I was so kind of overwhelmed by the fact that they had built a house. I kind of made the suggestion, I would like to stay in a little bamboo place, but I was expecting a little shack, you know, a little, like, they have these field huts, and I was expecting something like that, very simple. And then I came here and I found this incredible building that they had made for me, thinking that as I'm an outsider, I would need certain facilities. Like, for example, this is a front room, and in their own houses, they really don't have this kind of curtains and all of that, right? So then I was so kind of overwhelmed with the fact that they had gone to such efforts to make this house for me. And I thought, well, I'm not here that much, so what can we do with this place? And then I thought, I got the idea I said, let's turn it into the Wano Center for Art, Culture and Knowledge, and we can do little programs here, little cultural programs, little workshops. It can just be a space to discuss and meet and talk about the Wano art culture, because I'm not here very much. Then I thought I would give it back to the community. They gave it to me, I want to give it back to them. And so I painted that sign out the front there saying, and I said, this is now your little center for art, culture and knowledge. But I think they're a bit unsure about what to do. When I'm here, then I kind of motivate some little things to happen here, but I think it gets more or less locked up when I'm not here. But then I thought, well, let's try and decorate it a bit and make it some, and I don't have much stuff, but I printed up some photos and things, and we did a little workshop, animation puppet making workshop here 1 year. So these are some of those puppets that they made, and some photographs, and these are from our various animation projects. This is all the Wano story of the gourd, with the little chief and the main character, the hero, and the gourd. And this is Tonge wearing the mask, and he's playing the part of the elder. Is it the elder brother? No, sorry, it's the younger brother. The younger brother of the two brothers. The younger brother came down to earth, and he got stuck on earth because the elder brother tricked him and pulled up the ladder, and he was left on earth. And then they had this big fight, and the younger brother was banging away on the log drum, and the elder brother in the sky was throwing thunderbolts, and you know. And there we are, dressed up. This was also in my first visit. They like the girls here. They love dressing up, and they look so beautiful in their traditional garments, attire. And they were so, you know, fascinated with dressing me up because I look so different from them. So we all dressed up nicely for that. Yeah. And this is a necklace made by local ladies make this kind of thing, and it's made from cane. You know, they presented it to me, and there's even a little instrument here attached to it. Yeah, it's a kind of like a jugwa's harp kind of an instrument. Yeah.
Okay.
You just kind of somehow put it in your mouth, but I haven't worked out how to do it. Yeah. Well, again, this is from Ninu village, which is just across the way there, and these are those. This is the chief of Ninu village, the one current chief, and you know, because he's the boss, everyone has to do what he says. And I asked him, can I record some stories? And he then, you know, directed these elders to tell me the stories and sing songs, and they sang a beautiful song. So that's from Ninu village. Yeah. And then this one here is actually a Wano carving, and it is in the National Museum in New Delhi, and it is got here the tattoo design of the headhunters of the past. And I just thought it was really beautiful, and I had these pictures with very little resources, how to make a place look a little bit artistic. And that's our animation, well, anyway, that's our animation workshop. So this bamboo platform is traditional. Yeah, this is, they call it the haile in their language, and they build it on the houses for drying grains. Yeah, they spread out the grains, the rice or whatever, the millet, on these cane mats and they dry it. But in my case, because I'm not a farmer and all that, they built this for me so that I could sit and enjoy this beautiful view. And in fact, last winter, this platform had decayed because it doesn't last very long because it rains really heavily here. So this house was built in 2020, and earlier this year, this platform had to be replaced. So I asked them to replace it, and they bought the bamboos. I think it was about 50 bamboos were used. And Jatwang's uncle supervised it, and his two brothers and another helper, they built it. And it took them one day to build it. And I made a little film about that, the construction of this, how they did it and everything, and it was really sweet. And also, you see, when they build something, it's the tradition that the house owner should provide them with food. So I also provided them with a meal. Luckily, there was only 4 people, because when they build the houses, they might have to provide for 100 people or more. But I made the little meal for 4 people, and I recorded it all. Yeah.
Okay.
It's very solid, and it's pretty solid. I mean, yeah. And yeah.
It has a window as well.
And it's got a window, and again, the window, they said, Jatwang, he said, look, we've made a window for you so that I can lie in bed
And look
out at
outside.
the beautiful view. Now, they don't lie in bed and look out at the view. They've done it for me. But then, once the houses are dark, because they don't spend any time in the house, only in the night time. Otherwise, they're out in the field. They go out very early in the morning, and they're out all day long, and then they come back with big baskets full of vegetables and wood. From time to time, I do wonder for myself, why on earth am I doing this? Yeah, like what has brought me to such remote corners and things. And then I reflect on my mother, who also was in her day a very adventurous lady. She traveled up and down India. She joined the Juna Akara, which is a sannyas sadhu Shaivite sect. And she had the guru who lived in the Himalayas, and she herself lived in the ashram in the Himalayas for many, many years, like probably more than 20 years before he passed away. And this was not any kind of a well-known international ashram at all. It was like a little Himalayan ashram, and she was the only. They had some women there, some nuns, and they were like basically village women who had decided not to get married and had joined the Juna Akara, and they had but my mother was the only foreign person doing this kind of thing back in those days, and she lived for many years like that, and she also inspired me because she was very strong, and she told me her philosophy was high thinking, simple living. So maybe that rubbed off a bit on me and what I'm doing. And she certainly encourages me in what I'm doing. And she says that had she been younger, she would have come with me on all these adventures, but she likes to hear about what I'm doing. And she sometimes tells me, don't come back, stay where you are. It's better where you are, in nature, with nature, loving people who are connected to nature. Yeah. So my mother had followed this tradition for probably around 30 years, and she still follows it, but it's all changed now, Means like the whole situation and politics and everything else has changed. So it's not what she's not the way she really liked it to go. She was more into being in a retreat in a remote Himalayan area, So, but she always keeps that in her heart. She is a sadhu in her heart, but now she is not living in an ashram. She's staying in London for the time being. Let's see what happens. Yeah. But she was an inspiring, very strong lady, my mother. she also traveled up and down India and to all these remote areas, and she went to visit all the holy temples like Amarnath and Girnar and all these places, and she's been to almost every single Kumbh Mela. And I used to go along with her to Kumbh Melas. I'd tag along with her, and somehow, even though it's not necessarily staying with sadhu, I used to stay in the sadhu tents with my mother, and she'd kind of squeeze me in, and we'd be in the back of the tent because it's not really the environment for women or for foreign women to be staying. But somehow by default, because she was part of the establishment anyway, and I was like sort of her daughter, so that was all right, you know. But I always had to keep in the background and that, keep quiet and keep in the background. But it was a good experience. It made me strong and hardy for doing this kind of thing. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much.